dear listener, to Sleepy Story Facts, a gentle bedtime story, a quiet sleep story for the stillest part of the night, where the mind can loosen its grip on the day and drift slowly and safely toward deep sleep. And tonight, our relaxing story begins on a future Mars mission. Not during any emergency, not in any hurry, but during one calm and ordinary morning on the red planet, where everything has been designed for comfort, rhythm, and peace. So before we step fully into this nighttime story, let yourself settle in, let your shoulders soften, let your jaw unclench, let the muscles around your eyes grow smooth and loose, and imagine that you are lying in a warm sleeping berth inside a quiet habitat beneath the pale Martian dawn, while the air around you is softly filtered. The temperature is steady, and the low hum of life support moves like a distant lullaby through the walls. On Mars, a day is only a little longer than a day on Earth, about 24 hours and 39 minutes, and that tiny extra stretch of time makes the whole morning feel unhurried, as if the planet itself understands the art of resting, the art of extending each moment just enough for a calm breath, a slower thought, a gentler landing into sleep. Outside the habitat, the horizon is wide and bronze and rose, the ground covered in iron-rich dust that gives Mars its famous red color. And yet, in the early light, it does not feel harsh at all, only muted and velvety, like powdered cinnamon, beneath a sky that is softly butterscotch near the edges and cool above. And because the Martian atmosphere is so thin, made mostly of carbon dioxide, the light behaves in delicate ways, scattering differently from Earth, so that sunrise and sunset can sometimes hold pale blue tones close to the sun. A quiet reversal, a scientific little wonder whispered into the morning. You are not walking yet, not speaking, not doing anything at all, only resting and listening, while your imagined crew begins its day beyond the sliding door, their footsteps slow, because gravity here is only about 38% of Earth's, making every motion lighter, easier, almost buoyant, as if the body has been relieved of some old burden it has carried for far too long. In this gentle bedtime world, the day begins with water warming in silent pipes, with recycled air moving through filters, with small green leaves in the habitat garden unfolding under careful lamps. Because on a long Mars mission, almost everything precious is reused, conserved, tended, and nothing is wasted if it can be transformed into comfort once again. Even the water has its own sleepy journey, gathered, purified, and returned, circling through the habitat in a patient loop. And there is something deeply calming in that, something reassuring. The idea that on Mars survival itself becomes a kind of tender rhythm, a repeated act of care. Breakfast is simple, warm, and quiet, and no one rushes through it, because every routine here matters. Every calm habit is part of what keeps the mind steady so far from Earth, which this morning is only a bright thought in the black beyond the sunlit dust, a blue memory hanging millions of kilometers away, sending messages that take many minutes to arrive, not because anything is wrong, but simply because space is spacious, because light itself needs time to cross the distance. And so the habitat has learned to live in a more thoughtful tempo, one where not every answer is immediate, one where silence is not emptiness, but room to breathe. After breakfast, someone glances through the observation port where the land spreads outward in patient layers. Plains and scattered rocks and low ridges shaped over ages by wind. And perhaps far away, beyond the visible curve of this local landscape, lie the giant wonders of Mars, Olympus Mons, rising higher than any volcano on Earth. Valles Marineris opening into canyons, so immense they make earthly distances feel small, and ancient river valleys that quietly suggest that long ago liquid water once moved across this now dry world. All of it part of a planet that was never merely barren, only different, only waiting for a slower kind of attention. Later, when the work begins, it is calm work, almost meditative, checking systems, brushing a fine skin of dust from seals, reviewing plant growth, measuring air pressure, and preparing for a short surface walk. And even outside the habitat, the day remains serene, because the suit holds you in a pocket of warmth and breath, and each step presses lightly into the regolith with a softness that would feel almost dreamlike if it were not so real, the lower gravity turning walking into a measured glide, a careful floating stride beneath a silent sky. No birds cross this horizon, no leaves rustle in trees, no waves break. And yet Mars has its own kind of music, the hush of suit fans, the faint vibration of equipment, the whisper of dust moving over stone, the deep stillness of open land, untouched by crowds or traffic or noise. And in that stillness, the mind can finally stretch out and rest, as if it has been waiting all along for a place this wide and this simple. Above, the two small moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, keep their distant company, strange little companions for a world that seems at first so solitary. And even solitude here feels gentle rather than lonely, because the habitat glows behind you, because the crew is near, because human presence on Mars in this bedtime story is not conquest, but caretaking, not speed, but patience, not triumph, but quiet belonging. And now, as the first calm chapter of this soothing journey settles around you, let the facts and the fiction blur softly together. Let the science become a blanket rather than a lesson. Let this calming narration carry you deeper into comfort, because this is a sleep story made to help you fall asleep. A gentle bedtime drift through one peaceful day on a future Mars mission, where every system hums, every shadow is soft, every routine is kind, and the whole red world seems to be breathing slowly with you. The outer hatch opens with patient slowness, and the morning on Mars receives you not with drama, but with stillness so complete that it feels almost ceremonial, as though the planet has been waiting a very long time to offer this silent welcome to anyone willing to move softly enough to notice it. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story meant to ease the busy mind into a calmer rhythm, your first steps beyond the habitat are small and careful and wonderfully light, because Mars holds you with less gravity than Earth, allowing each movement to become a slow and floating gesture, the kind of motion that seems made for a relaxing story, the kind that invites the body listening in bed to unclench a little more, to sink deeper into the mattress, fall asleep not by force, but by permission. The ground beneath your boots is a fine powder of ancient stone, soft in appearance, rust-colored and muted, spread across the plain like velvet dust under a sky that seems thinner and more delicate than any sky remembered from home. And even the distance looks gentle here, as if the far horizon has been blurred on purpose so that nothing sharp can interrupt the peace of this nighttime story. Only low ridges, broad open land, and the faint suggestion of older landscapes sleeping beneath the newer layers of wind-shaped soil. Behind you, the habitat rests in quiet confidence, its rounded structure warmed by sunlight, its airlocks and panels and windows made less to conquer Mars than to live politely within it. And there is something deeply soothing in that idea that a future Mars mission might be built not around urgency, but around routine, kindness, and cooperation, where every checklist is also a form of care, every measurement a reassurance, every soft tone over the comm system part of a larger calming narration designed not only for safety, but for steadiness of mind. As you walk, your breathing remains even in the suit, and the suit itself feels like a private little room you carry around your body, a miniature home of warmth, oxygen, pressure, and patient engineering. And because a spacesuit must create an entire livable environment in a place where the atmosphere cannot support a human breath, each soft mechanical murmur becomes strangely comforting, like the hush of a fan in a peaceful bedroom, like the steady rhythm of a train at night, like proof that invisible systems are working quietly on your behalf, while you do almost nothing at all except continue forward at this untroubled pace. Head, the crew's short morning route curves gently toward a small instrument station where weather readings are collected day after day. And even the weather on Mars, though often described with scientific precision, feels in this moment like a sleepy sort of conversation between sky and dust, with thin air, pale sunlight, and temperatures that can vary widely between day and night, reminding everyone in the habitat that warmth is precious, shelter is precious, and human comfort on another planet is something lovingly made rather than casually assumed. One crew member pauses beside a rock shaped smooth by endless abrasion, and another kneels with graceful slowness to inspect a sensor post dusted in red powder. And no one hurries anyone else, because on a long mission like this, calm attention matters more than speed, and the most ordinary tasks become almost meditative when performed in such a quiet place, where even the act of brushing a panel clean can feel like part of a gentle bedtime ritual, a small repeated movement that tells the nervous system everything is under control. Above, the daylight remains soft, and though Mars is farther from the sun than Earth, the morning still carries a clear and steady brightness, only gentler somehow, less insistent, as if the whole planet has agreed to keep its voice low. And in the distance, the land seems full of time rather than emptiness, because every plain and slope and scattered stone speaks of ages upon ages of change, of old volcanoes, vanished water, frozen reserves beneath the ground, drifting dust, and seasons shaped by a world that turns with patient consistency. through the dark. Perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about Mars, that it is not chaos, not randomness, but a planet of patterns, a place with day and night, with polar ice, with weather, with familiar cycles translated into a quieter key. And hearing that, somewhere between science and story, the listener may feel the mind begin to loosen its grip on the unfinished details of earthly life, letting emails and errands and worries grow dim and far away, replaced by the image of a lone, peaceful habitat and a few calm explorers moving carefully through a copper-colored morning. The instrument station finally comes into view, its surfaces reflecting a faint blush of sunlight, and the crew performs its checks with the kind of elegant repetition that only practice can produce, confirming readings, clearing dust, recording tiny changes in pressure and temperature. And each little action becomes another gentle fact in this soothing chain of moments. Another reason to exhale, another reason to trust the slow design of the day. Because on Mars, nothing meaningful is rushed. Not the growing of plants in the habitat, not the recycling of water, not the study of weather, not even the telling of this sleep story, which is content to move at the pace of drifting thought, at the pace of drowsiness, at the pace of a listener nearing deep sleep. When the checks are done, no grand declaration follows, only a turn back toward home, toward the habitat standing quietly under the wide open sky. And as you walk in that direction, each step feels a little softer than the one before, your path marked by shallow prints that may remain for a very long time in this dry and wind-shaped place. And there is comfort in that too. The thought that gentle things can last, that small, peaceful movements can leave a trace, that somewhere in the great silence of a future Mars morning, a human being can walk carefully across the dust and feel not lost, but held within a vast and tranquil order. And so this relaxing story continues, carrying you onward through the calm day, through the science and stillness, through the gentle bedtime atmosphere of another world, until the voice grows softer, the thoughts grow slower, and sleep begins to gather around you like the first cool shadow inside the habitat door. By the time you return through the airlock and hear the soft seals close behind you, the habitat feels warmer than before, not only because the life support systems have kept the temperature steady and kind, but because stepping in from the vast stillness of Mars makes every familiar sound feel tender, every filtered breath of air feel like a welcome home. And in this sleep story, this gentle bedtime journey through a calm day on a future Mars mission, the next part of the morning unfolds not in a place of urgency, but in the small garden module where the crew keeps trays of leaves, herbs, and compact vegetables growing beneath quiet lamps, their green color looking almost miraculous against the soft whites and pale silvers of the habitat walls, as though Earth has sent a whisper of itself across space just to keep everyone company. You move there slowly, following the others through a corridor where each handhold, panel, and softly lit display has been arranged with practical care. And when the hatch opens into the growing room, the air seems to change character at once, becoming a little softer, a little richer, touched by the clean and living scent of plants. And perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about a future Mars mission, that even so far from forests and rain and oceans, people would still choose to carry something green with them, something leafed and rooted and patient, not only for food and oxygen and research, but for the calm it brings to the human mind. The plants do not hurry, and so no one hurries around them, and the crew settles into a slow routine of checking moisture levels, trimming a tired leaf here and there, recording growth, and turning a tray so each row receives its balanced share of light. While outside the habitat, the red world waits in silence, ancient and dry. And inside this one bright room, a miniature cycle of life continues in measured peace, water rising through stems, tiny veins opening, the chemistry of photosynthesis carrying on with serene confidence, converting light into stored energy, as if this were the most natural thing in the universe, which perhaps it is on Mars, where the surface air is thin and cold and not fit for breathing. Every little pocket of living atmosphere inside the habitat becomes precious, and the garden is more than a workstation, more than a technical success. It is a place where attention slows down, where even the most focused engineer finds themselves standing a little more quietly than before, listening to nothing in particular, gazing at the faint texture of lettuce leaves or the curled tendrils of a dwarf tomato plant, and feeling the nervous system settle simply because life is present in such a gentle form. One crew member mists a tray with careful restraint, another checks nutrient flow, and somewhere nearby warm water moves through hidden lines with that same hushed consistency that has carried this whole relaxing story forward. Because survival on Mars is not loud heroism, but soft repetition. The same calm steps performed again and again, until routine itself becomes a lullaby. Perhaps through a nearby port, you can glimpse the dusty brightness outside, where the plain stretches away beneath a pale sky. And it is easy to imagine how different the habitat must feel from the open land. A cocoon of pressure, warmth, moisture, and green life floating in a sea of stone-colored quiet. And yet the contrast is not harsh, only beautiful, because Mars has its own peace too, a piece of wide horizons and old geology and time laid out in broad layers, while the habitat holds the peace of human design, of blankets folded neatly, meals warmed gently, instruments humming in their calm and trustworthy way. As the work in the garden continues, someone mentions the changing seasons on Mars, longer than Earth's, because the planet takes more time to circle the sun. And that thought drifts through the room like a sleepy little fact, not demanding attention, only offering it, reminding everyone that this distant world also knows winter and spring in its own measured style, that its axis is tilted enough to create familiar rhythms, and that even here, in a place once imagined only as remote and unreachable, there are cycles, patterns, returns, all the quiet structures that make a life feel steadier. For a while, nothing happens except what is supposed to happen, which is another deeply comforting thing. The realization that an uneventful day can be a beautiful day. That on a successful Mars mission, the calmest hours may be the most cherished, the ones when systems behave, crops grow, the dust stays outside. Messages from Earth arrive in their own delayed and thoughtful time, and the crew can simply care for their little world without interruption. You linger near a shelf of herbs, and though no dramatic fragrance fills the room, there is enough of a fresh, living note to soften the edges of memory, enough to suggest kitchens and windowsills and sunlit homes far away. And in that moment, the story becomes even gentler, because the distance between planets no longer feels lonely, only spacious. A wide, soft interval filled with light, engineering, patience, and the quiet refusal of life to vanish when carried with devotion. Eventually, the checks are complete, the measurements stored, the leaves left to rest beneath their lamps. And as the crew prepares to move on toward the slower middle of the day, the garden remains behind like a tiny green heart, beating inside the habitat, steady and untroubled, while your own thoughts, following this calming narration, begin to feel less like separate thoughts at all, and more like slow drifting clouds, passing one by one across the inner sky, making room for deep sleep, making room for this bedtime story to become softer and softer until the green glow of the garden, the warm air of the corridor, and the silent red world beyond the walls all blend into one peaceful image that can carry you gently downward into rest. Soon the middle of the day arrives so gently that it hardly feels like a transition at all. And inside the habitat, the change is marked not by noise or rush, but by a deepening steadiness, a settled rhythm that makes this sleep story feel even slower, even softer, as though the whole future Mars mission has entered a restful pause designed especially for a bedtime story. And after the cool openness of the morning walk and the warm green calm of the garden, the crew now moves into the peaceful work of noon, where sunlight falls in pale amber across the outer dust shields, where instruments continue their silent measurements, and where every human motion seems guided by the same principle of care. Because on Mars, where the world outside remains dry, vast, and thin-aired, the truest luxury is not excitement, but balance. In the small common module, a meal is being prepared, simple and nourishing. And even this ordinary moment becomes part of the relaxing story, because food on a long mission is never only fuel. It is memory and routine and comfort, a way of reminding the body that it is safe, that the day has shape, that there is a time for waking work, and a time for quiet eating, and a time, later still, for rest. And so warm containers are opened slowly, utensils are laid out with almost ceremonial neatness, and someone rehydrates a dish, while another slices greens from the habitat garden, adding a little living brightness to the meal. And the sight of those fresh leaves against the clean surfaces of the table feels improbably tender, as though Earth itself has leaned very close, just for a moment to whisper that life can remain gentle anywhere if it is tended with enough patience. Beyond the walls, the Martian plain stretches under the soft noon sky, not blue like home, but muted and delicate. And because the atmosphere is thin, the sunlight seems both clear and restrained, as if it has traveled farther in silence before reaching the ground. And the distant landforms lie in patient layers, old lava, sediment, dust, and stone, all resting beneath an immense stillness that has lasted longer than memory, longer than language, longer than any human dream of spaceflight. And yet now, within this restful habitat, human life has found a way to settle into that stillness rather than disturb it, making room for small things, for breathing, for meals, for recorded notes, for cups held in gloved or ungloved hands, depending on the room, for a few quiet voices drifting through the air as softly as if they are careful not to wake the planet itself. No one speaks very much, because they do not need to, and the companionship of the crew feels easy, built from repetition and trust, from shared mornings and familiar checklists, and the calm understanding that every person here helps hold the little world together. And perhaps that too is one of the most relaxing facts about a calm day on a future Mars mission, that survival would not depend on constant heroics, but on quiet teamwork, on ordinary kindnesses repeated again and again, on noticing when someone needs silence, on making the meal, on cleaning the filter, on checking the seal twice, on remembering that peace is built from small, dependable actions. After lunch, the habitat grows even quieter, and some of the crew turns to low-intensity tasks, reviewing overnight data from weather sensors, comparing pressure trends, noting dust accumulation, and listening to the soft clicks and tones of equipment as if they are part of the habitat's own breathing pattern, while others take a scheduled rest period because on a mission so far from Earth, the mind must be cared for with as much devotion as any machine. And rest is treated not as a luxury, but as a deliberate and intelligent part of the day, a practice of steadiness, a way of preserving clarity and calm. Beneath the long arc of exploration, you find a place near a small observation port and look outward once more. And from here, Mars appears almost painted, the red dust paling to rose where light touches it most fully, the shadows lying in cool bands beside scattered rocks, the horizon so far and level that it seems to invite the eyes to soften rather than focus. And somewhere beyond that horizon are giant volcanoes, dry valleys, and frozen stores of water hidden in ice and mineral form. All the quiet evidence that Mars is not empty, but full of stories told slowly across immense spans of time. And because this is a gentle bedtime, a nighttime story carried on a calm scientific current, you do not need to chase those stories anywhere. You only need to rest near them, to feel their age and stillness, to let that sense of vast, patient time loosen the knots of the day you brought with you. Perhaps a message arrives from Earth, delayed by the distance, as all messages must be. And when it appears on a screen, it does not break the calm, but deepens it, because the very delay makes communication feel softer, more reflective, less sharp than ordinary life. A reminder that space teaches slowness, that not every answer can be immediate, that some thoughts are allowed to drift before they are received. And there is something deeply soothing in that, something that makes this sleep story feel like a place apart from hurry, a place where silence is natural, and waiting is not a problem, but a rhythm. The hour lengthens, the meal is cleaned away, the instruments continue their watch, and the habitat settles into the warm hush of midday on Mars, held between the broad red land outside and the carefully made human shelter within. And as this calming narration continues to move around you like a blanket of low light and softened sound, your own mind may begin to feel less crowded, less pulled by unfinished things. Because here, on this imagined and serene world, nothing is asking to be done quickly. Nothing is demanding urgency, and the day itself seems content to float, carrying you with it toward deeper calm, toward slower breathing, toward the kind of quiet in which a listener can finally fall asleep and let deep sleep gather gently, like pale dust settling without weight across the endless and peaceful plain in the soft middle hours of the Martian afternoon, when the habitat has already warmed into its calm and dependable rhythm. The day seems to widen rather than hurry forward, and that widening brings with it a kind of hush so deep and so spacious that it feels made for a sleep story, made for a bedtime story, made for the quiet inward drifting that comes when the body knows it no longer needs to do anything except listen, breathe, and rest. And so you remain near the observation port for a while, watching the pale light lean over the red plain in a way that feels almost tender. Because on Mars, even brightness seems softened by distance, as though the sun, farther away than it is on Earth, has chosen to speak in a gentler tone here, laying thin sheets of gold over the dust, the rocks, the low ripples of ground that have been shaped by countless winds, too faint to hear from inside. And somewhere far out across that broad and silent landscape, there may be old channels where water once moved long ago, ancient pathways worn into stone when Mars was wetter than the quiet planet seen today. And the thought of that vanished movement does not make the scene sad, only deeper, only more layered, only more peaceful, because it reminds you that stillness can hold memory without losing its calm. Inside the habitat, the crew moves through the afternoon with beautiful economy, not speaking much, not rushing anywhere, only performing a series of small and gentle tasks that keep life flowing smoothly. One person checking a soft-lit display that tracks power stored from the habitat's energy systems. Another making a note about indoor humidity. Another passing through the corridor with folded fabric and clean equipment in their arms, and every action seems to belong exactly where it is. Each little duty, like one stitch in a long blanket of care, wrapped around everyone aboard. And there is something deeply relaxing in imagining a place where almost everything has been simplified down to what truly matters: warmth, air, water, food, companionship, and the steady confidence that all of these are being watched over with patience. Perhaps this is why the habitat feels so soothing now, because on Mars the unnecessary falls away, and what remains is rhythm. And rhythm is one of the oldest comforts known to the human nervous system. The rhythm of breathing, of walking, of sleeping, of waking, of light moving slowly across a room, of meals at familiar hours, of plants quietly turning themselves toward their lamps. And as the afternoon carries on, those rhythms weave together until the whole outpost feels less like a machine and more like a living lullaby, humming softly at the edge of your awareness. From the garden module comes the faint impression of green life continuing its patient work. Tiny leaves holding light, roots resting in carefully balanced moisture, stems lifting without sound, and it is easy to imagine that even the plants are drowsy in this hour, though of course they are busy in their own serene way, gathering energy, exchanging gases, doing the quiet chemistry that supports the crew, one invisible breath at a time. And the fact that so much depends on these hidden exchanges only adds to the wonder of the scene, because this future Mars mission is not only about exploration, not only about science, but about gentleness, about building a little island of balance in a world of dust and distance. Soon, a few fine particles of red grit begin to move beyond the habitat windows. Not a storm, not a threat, only a small wandering veil of dust passing low over the plain. And even this feels soft from where you are, like a whispered reminder that Mars is always in slow conversation with its own surface, always shifting a little, brushing itself with wind too thin to shake the structure, but strong enough over time to sculpt dunes, smooth stones, and carry the planet's red powder from place to place. And watching that motion from safety is strangely hypnotic, because it asks nothing of you. It simply continues, a loose ribbon of color gliding over the ground, then thinning, then almost disappearing into the bright, still air. One crew member dims a panel. Another settles into a seat to review a quiet stream of readings from the morning instruments. And nearby, someone warms water for a later drink, the small domestic sound blending so naturally into the habitat that it becomes part of the atmosphere of the story itself, part of the calming narration that invites the mind to loosen, to stop keeping score, to stop rehearsing tomorrow, to stop circling old thoughts, and instead to drift here, to this room, to this future afternoon on Mars, where the plain outside is silent, and the light inside is low and kind. And every practical thing has been done carefully enough that peace can settle in around it. If you listen closely, you can almost feel the different kinds of quiet layered together. The quiet outside, immense and planetary. The quiet inside, warm and engineered. The quiet of human concentration. The quiet of recycled air moving through filters. The quiet of sleeping machines that are not truly asleep, but resting in their steady purpose. And beneath all of it, the quiet of time itself, stretching a little longer on Mars, where each soul gives just a bit more than an Earth day, as though this world understands that rest is best when it is unhurried. Gradually, the afternoon becomes the sort of hour that cannot be measured only by clocks, because it begins to feel suspended, floating somewhere between work and evening, between daylight and the first thought of dusk. And in that floating space, your own thoughts may begin to blur pleasantly at the edges, becoming less like sentences and more like softened impressions. Red land, amber light, green leaves, warm air, distant earth, slow footsteps, safe walls, and this gentle bedtime mood deepens until the whole habitat seems wrapped in a peaceful pause. A pause wide enough to hold science and wonder together without any strain at all. A pause where facts about Mars arrive like feathers rather than lessons, where a relaxing story can carry you toward deep sleep simply by showing you a calm place and allowing you to remain there. And so the soft afternoon continues, dust wandering lightly beyond the windows, instruments shining with quiet assurance, the crew moving as slowly as needed while you rest inside this nighttime story. And let the red planet's patient stillness lull you farther and farther down toward sleep as the long and peaceful Martian afternoon begins to lean toward evening. The habitat enters one of its quietest and most beautiful moods. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story carried forward on a slow current of science and softness, the shift is so gradual that it feels less like a change and more like a deepening, as though the whole outpost is exhaling after a calm day of careful work and settling into a gentler layer of stillness, while outside the windows, the red plain begins to lose a little of its brightness, and the low light gathers itself over the land in pale copper bands, making the dust, the stones, and the distant ridges appear softer than ever, worn down not only by wind and time, but by the tender hush of coming evening. Inside, warm air moves through the habitat with the same steady patience it has shown all day. And the crew, having already completed the most important tasks, now turns to the kind of low, unhurried routines that make life far from Earth feel not only possible, but deeply comforting. One person organizing the next day's surface checklist with slow and tidy motions, another wiping a thin trace of Martian dust from a storage seal, another setting a small kettle to warm recycled water for a soothing evening drink. And every action seems beautifully proportioned to the hour, never rushed, never sharp, simply part of the quiet architecture of care that holds this future Mars mission together. Perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about a calm day on Mars. That evening is not a collapse after strain, but a soft transition prepared by many small, thoughtful habits, by meals taken on time, by systems checked early, by tools returned to their places, by plants tended gently, by the understanding that when human beings live on another world, peace must be built deliberately. And once built, it can be astonishingly serene. Through the observation port, the sky begins to reveal one of Mars's loveliest little surprises. Because near sunset, the thin atmosphere can scatter light in a way that leaves a cool blue glow near the sinking sun, a quiet reversal of earthly color, and the effect feels almost dreamlike even to those who know the science behind it. So the crew lingers there for a moment, not speaking much, simply letting the blue-tinted light rest against the glass, while the surrounding sky remains soft and dusty. And in the silent space of this nighttime story, the sight becomes a kind of blessing, a reminder that even a planet so often described as harsh has its own subtle gentleness, its own graceful evening colors, its own way of preparing the mind for rest. Beyond the habitat, temperatures will drop as the sun lowers, and everyone inside knows that the Martian night can be extremely cold. Yet that fact brings no unease here, because the walls are well insulated, the systems are stable, the power reserves are healthy, and safety has become so woven into the texture of the habitat that the oncoming dark only makes the interior seem warmer, cozier, and more inviting. A lantern of human calm on a wide and ancient plain, the garden module glows softly down the corridor, its lamps now taking on the role of a miniature sun for the leaves within. And when someone passes by to make one final evening check, the room appears almost sacred in its stillness, green against white, moist against dry, alive against the vast mineral quiet outside. And the plants seem to hold the last tenderness of earth in their stems and surfaces, though by now they also belong to Mars, to this little closed cycle of breath and water and care, to this gentle bedtime world where science is not cold at all, but intimate, sustaining, and kind. Soon the warm drinks are ready, held in secure cups and sipped slowly. And the simple act of drinking something heated in a distant habitat becomes its own form of calming narration, a physical reassurance moving through the body while a delayed message from Earth is read in silence and set aside without urgency, because space has taught everyone here a slower emotional rhythm, a patient acceptance that words can travel late and still arrive with meaning. And somehow that delay makes everything softer, less abrupt, more spacious, as if even conversation must cross a velvet distance before entering the room above the darkening horizon. One of Mars's small moons may soon be passing through the sky. Perhaps Phobos, moving quickly compared with the moon known on Earth, tracing its unusual path with quiet certainty, and the thought of that companion drifting overhead adds another layer of peace to the evening, because nothing here is truly lonely. Not the habitat, not the crew, not the listener following this relaxing story toward deep sleep. All of it held within a larger celestial rhythm of orbits, rotations, repeating dawns, and repeating nights. As lights are dimmed in the common module, the habitat becomes even gentler, all hard edges softened by amber glows and low displays, all footsteps quieter, all voices reduced to murmurs, until the whole place feels like a sheltered breathing space tucked inside the enormous silence of Mars. And you can sense the day folding itself, closed with exquisite care, not ending abruptly, but easing itself layer by layer toward rest, the way a blanket is drawn over sleeping shoulders, the way eyes close before the mind fully notices, the way a deep sleep begins not with a command, but with permission. And so this sleep story carries you onward through the blue-lit evening, through the hush of instruments and the faint fragrance of warmed water and growing leaves, through the sight of a calm red world cooling under a darkening sky, until thoughts themselves begin to drift more slowly, stretching out and thinning like fine dust in low gravity, while the habitat remains steady around you, quiet, warm, and watchful. And the peaceful day on Mars prepares to give itself gently to night. Night settles over Mars with such patience that it almost seems to bloom rather than arrive. And inside the habitat, where the air remains warm and softly circulated, and every system continues its hidden work with calm precision, the first true evening hours feel like the gentlest part of the whole day, as though the red planet, after holding the crew in its copper light and spacious silence, has now lowered its voice even further for the sake of this sleep story, this bedtime story, this relaxing story meant to help the listener fall asleep beneath a canopy of slow scientific wonder. And so the outpost dims itself in stages, corridor lights softening to amber, displays lowering their glow, the common room becoming less a workplace and more a sheltering nook suspended in a vast and ancient darkness. While outside, the thin Martian atmosphere lets the cold deepen quickly over the plain, drawing long blue-gray shadows into the hollows and leaving the land beyond the windows dark, still and velvety, as if the whole world has been wrapped in a layer of quiet dust and night. In the sleeping quarters, blankets are unfolded, straps are checked, and each berth seems less like a compartment and more like a small private harbor, a place where the body can float into rest while the mind drifts farther outward into the story, imagining the immense old surface beyond the habitat walls, a surface shaped by eons of wind, frost, volcanic history, and vanished water, all now resting under the stars without urgency, without sound, without any need to become anything other than what it already is. And perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts of all about a calm day on a future Mars mission, that the planet does not ask for haste, only attention, only care, only the willingness to move gently through its silence. In another part of the habitat, one crew member completes the final evening check of the life support panel, confirming the steady balance of oxygen, pressure, temperature, and moisture. And there is profound comfort in that small ritual, because on Mars, safety is not dramatic. It is rhythmic, built from repeated observations and quiet trust, from the simple knowledge that warm air is flowing where it should, clean water is circulating where it should, and power is resting in reserve for the long, cold hours ahead. And as these checks conclude, the habitat seems to settle with them, like a house on a winter night after every door has been closed and every light turned low. From the garden module comes the faint green glow of the lamps, still tending their leaves. And in the hush of evening, those plants feel even more miraculous, small living witnesses to the continuity between worlds, carrying the chemistry of Earth into Martian night, lifting moisture through their stems, trading breath with the crew in a silent exchange so old and so elegant that it feels almost sacred. And if the listener allows the mind to rest there for a while, among the leaves and soft light and recycled warmth, it becomes easy to feel that science itself can be a form of comfort, not merely knowledge, but a kind of gentle architecture that makes shelter, steadiness, and sleep possible millions of kilometers from home. Outside, the sky above Mars has darkened into a depth so clear and spacious that the stars seem less like distant sparks and more like fixed points in an immense velvet field. And although the habitat glass shows only a framed portion of that celestial calm, it is enough to quiet the thoughts, enough to remind anyone listening that the universe is not only vast, but patient, full of slow orbits and measured rotations and moons that pass in their own time. And perhaps somewhere above the outpost, one of Mars's two small companions is gliding through the night, Phobos or Deimos, each with its own peculiar rhythm, each adding a subtle companionship to the otherwise open sky. No one in the habitat speaks above a murmur now, because the hour itself encourages softness, and even ordinary things take on the texture of a gentle bedtime ritual. the fastening of a sleeve, the sip of warm water, the folding of a cloth, the quiet recording of one last note in the mission log. And all of it blends so smoothly into the atmosphere of the outpost that it becomes part of the calming narration of the night, part of the sleepy cadence that invites the nervous system to stop scanning, stop planning, stop holding itself upright against the day. A future Mars mission, in this serene and carefully imagined form, is not made restful by escaping reality, but by attending to it lovingly, by understanding the dust, respecting the cold, building against the thinness of the air, and then, within that understanding, creating a small world of warmth, green life, nourishment, companionship, and routine. And there is something so deeply reassuring in that image that the mind, hearing it in the darkness of its own room back on Earth, may begin to surrender at last, realizing that rest does not come from perfection, but from steadiness, from knowing enough, caring enough, and letting the rest of the universe remain wide and quiet around you. Soon, the listener can imagine lying down in a berth of their own, hearing only the low and faithful hum of the habitat, feeling the slight and dreamy difference of Martian gravity in the way the body settles, lighter than on Earth, gently held rather than pressed, while beyond the walls, the night deepens over rust-red stone and ancient plains and sleeping ridges, and the red planet becomes not a distant frontier, but a cradle of silence, a place where this nighttime story can grow even softer, where each thought slows into a longer breath, each breath into a deeper calm, each calm into the threshold of deep sleep, until the habitat, the stars, the green leaves, the dim corridors, and the cold, peaceful dark outside all merge into one continuous and comforting image. And you drift there quietly, safely, and without effort through the first true hours of the Martian night. By the time midnight settles over the habitat, the whole outpost seems to have entered a deeper and more luminous hush, the kind of hush that does not feel empty at all, but full of warmth, shelter, and quiet purpose. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story, this soft and steady relaxing story for deep sleep, the hour unfolds so gently that it is almost difficult to tell where waking ends and dreaming begins. Because the corridors are dim now, the doors are closed with soft seals, the common room rests beneath a low amber glow, and outside the windows, the Martian plain lies dark and still beneath a sky scattered with patient stars, each one shining without hurry over the old red world, as though time itself has slowed to match the breathing of those inside. Most of the crew are asleep now, resting in their berths with the calm trust that comes only after a well-kept day. But one person remains awake for the midnight watch, not because anything is wrong, not because the habitat is in danger, but because every peaceful place needs someone to sit quietly with it for a while, someone to notice the soft patterns of the systems, the ordinary steadiness of light and pressure and warmth, the small signs that all is well. And so the watcher moves slowly through the habitat with the untroubled grace of someone who has long since learned that calm attention is its own form of rest. In the life support corner, panels glow faintly like sleepy constellations, and their tiny indicators blink with measured confidence, each one a little promise that air continues to flow, warmth continues to circulate, water continues its careful journey through pipes and filters. And there is something wonderfully comforting in those hidden cycles, because on Mars, life depends on them so completely that their steadiness becomes almost maternal, almost lullaby-like, a quiet assurance that the small world inside these walls is being held together with care. The watcher pauses by the garden module, and through the glass, the leaves appear dreamlike in their gentle, artificial dawn, though outside it is the middle of the Martian night, and the contrast is beautiful, green life glowing in a white room, while beyond the hull lies only rust-colored dust, stone, and starlight. And for a few slow moments, nothing happens except the silent work of stems lifting moisture, roots resting in their trays, lamps casting a tender sheen over curled edges of herbs, and the broad, soft faces of lettuce leaves. And the whole scene seems less like agriculture than a quiet prayer for continuity, a reminder that even here, far from rivers and birdsong and rain, life can still move in tiny, peaceful circles. When the watcher turns toward the observation port, the darkness outside feels almost velvety, immense without being frightening, vast without being lonely, because the habitat itself has become such a complete little refuge that the night beyond it only deepens the comfort within. And as the stars rest over the plain, one of Mars's small moons may drift silently above the horizon, tracing its old and faithful path, while the land below remains unchanged. Low ridges sleeping in shadow, the dust at rest, the ancient surface keeping its age in silence. And there is no drama in this vision, only scale, only stillness, only the quiet pleasure of knowing that the universe can be wide and gentle at the same time. Back in the corridor, the watcher warms a cup of water and holds it for a while, not even drinking at first, simply enjoying the soft touch of heat through the vessel, the little comfort of warmth against the hands, in a place where the night outside is so cold. And this too becomes part of the calming narration of the hour, the sense that small human rituals remain meaningful anywhere, that even on Mars, a person can pause in the middle of the night and feel soothed by warmth, by silence, by the low hum of the habitat, by the knowledge that everyone else is sleeping nearby in safety. Perhaps a routine note is entered into the night log, a few quiet observations, no abnormalities, all systems steady, external conditions calm. And those simple words, even imagined, are enough to make the listener relax more deeply, because what could be more comforting than uneventful peace, than a night so well tended that nothing needs to be fixed, nothing urgently answered, nothing bravely endured, only watched over with patience, while the hours glide by like slow shadows over a red and sleeping plain. As the watch continues, the boundary between the habitat and the listener's own room grows softer. And maybe now you can imagine that you too are in one of the sleeping berths, wrapped in gentle blankets, hearing only distant filtered air and the faintest mechanical murmur, feeling yourself lighter in this imagined gravity, less burdened, less anchored to the day you have lived, while around you the habitat breathes in its own slow rhythm, a breathing made of pumps, fans, warmth, and sleeping human trust. And above it, all the stars remain where they have always been, calm points in a patient dark, keeping silent company with the outpost and everyone inside it. Little by little, the midnight watch begins to feel less like a task and more like a blessing, a quiet interval given to the world so that others may rest. And as that gentle wakefulness fills the habitat, it also seems to cradle the listener, inviting every thought to soften, every worry to grow distant, every unfinished thing to wait until another time. Because this nighttime story asks nothing more of you now than stillness, asks nothing more than that you follow the warm corridor light, the green glow of the garden, the dark peace beyond the window, and the calm presence of the solitary watcher, until all of it merges into one seamless feeling of safety, slowness, and sleep. And the Martian midnight, with all its silence and science and quiet human care, carries you tenderly toward the deeper hours of rest, in the slow and tender hours after midnight, when even the lone watcher has grown accustomed to the gentle breathing of the habitat and the silent certainty of the systems around them. The whole future Mars outpost seems to enter its deepest layer of peace. And this sleep story, this bedtime story, this nighttime story meant to help you fall asleep, softens even further, as though the walls themselves have learned the art of calming narration. Because nothing in this hour demands anything sudden. Nothing startles, nothing insists, and the habitat simply continues its careful life in warm little circles of air and light, while outside the red planet rests beneath a dark sky so spacious and still that it seems to stretch forever in every direction. The watcher settles near the observation port once more, not out of duty alone, but because the view itself has become a kind of companion. And beyond the thick glass, the Martian plain lies under the last deep portion of night, its rocks and low ridges barely visible, its fine dust quiet at last, its ancient surface wrapped in cold shadow. And yet, even in darkness, there is softness here, because the land does not feel hostile in this relaxing story, only old, only restful, only patiently waiting for the next thin wash of morning light to arrive across it. Inside the habitat, the lamps remain dim, enough to guide a quiet footstep, enough to glow faintly on the corridor walls, enough to turn metal edges warm and gentle rather than hard. And in one sleeping berth, a crew member shifts slightly and then becomes still again, drifting deeper into rest, while in another, the blankets remain undisturbed. And it is comforting to imagine that on a calm Mars mission, sleep would be protected as carefully as air or water, treated as something essential, something precious, something that keeps the mind clear and the heart steady. So far from Earth, somewhere down the corridor, the garden module continues its invisible nighttime labor, leaves holding their moisture, roots resting in nutrient-rich trays, tiny living surfaces exchanging gases in ways so quiet and so ancient that they feel more like a blessing than a process. And if you let your thoughts rest there for a while, among the soft green lamps and the sleeping stems, it becomes easy to feel that life itself prefers gentleness, prefers cycles, prefers a rhythm of effort followed by release, of light followed by dark, of waking followed by deep sleep, and perhaps that is why this story can move so slowly, because the science within it is already full of lullabies if you know how to listen. The watcher lifts a warm cup, now only faintly steaming, and takes a small sip, while the habitat hums around them in tones so steady that they are almost like a distant choir of reassurance. And every hum means something kind: air being refreshed, warmth being shared, water being carried through its careful circuit. And though no one says these things aloud at this hour, the body understands them, relaxes because of them, trusts because of them, much as a sleeping passenger trusts the gentle motion of a ship at night without needing to see the ocean beneath. Beyond the window, the stars remain bright in the thin Martian sky, and slowly, almost too slowly to notice at first, there comes a change along the edge of the world. Not light exactly, not yet, but a subtle easing of darkness near the horizon, a hush within the hush, a suggestion that the planet is once again turning itself toward morning. And because a Martian soul is a little longer than a day on Earth, this approach of dawn feels especially patient, as though time on Mars is willing to stretch itself slightly. So no beautiful transition has to be rushed. The watcher notices and says nothing, because some changes are too peaceful for speech. And in that silence, the whole habitat seems to listen with them. The sleeping berths, the garden leaves, the storage bays, the folded suits waiting by the airlock, the quiet screens, the sealed doors, all of it suspended inside the oldest rhythm there is, the turning of a world toward light. And now the horizon wears the faintest ash rose tint, so delicate it might be imagined, then a little more, then a little more again. And as the land slowly emerges from shadow, the plain looks less empty than before, revealing small shapes and shallow contours. Old stones resting where they have rested for ages, soft bands of dust, low slopes smoothed by winds too thin to hear indoors. And there is something profoundly soothing in seeing a landscape return so gently, as if Mars itself is waking without ever having been fully asleep. This is the kind of peaceful fact that belongs inside a gentle bedtime story, that even on another planet morning can arrive with tenderness, that dawn does not always blaze, that it can instead gather itself quietly and lay one pale layer of brightness after another over the ground, until the world becomes visible by kindness rather than force. Inside, the first scheduled systems of the coming day begin their subtle adjustments, lights preparing to brighten in stages, temperature cycles shifting almost imperceptibly, not enough to wake anyone abruptly, only enough to guide the habitat toward morning with the same soft intelligence that carried it through the night. And the watcher, seeing all is well, feels that particular calm known only in the hour before others wake, when duty has become stillness and stillness has become almost dreamlike. And for you, listening, this moment is an invitation to go deeper rather than rise, to let the imagined dawn on Mars hold the last waking edges of your mind, while the rest of you drifts downward. Because this sleep story is not asking you to begin a new day, only to witness a calm one unfolding somewhere far away, and then to surrender fully, comfortably, peacefully as the red horizon lightens by degrees, and the habitat remains warm, quiet, and safe around the sleeping crew. The first true light of morning arrives on Mars so softly that it seems less like a sunrise and more like a quiet remembering, as though the planet, after holding its breath through the deep and star-filled night, now begins once more to reveal itself in layers of pale rose, muted gold, and cool copper. And inside the habitat, where the air is still warm and the lights are only just beginning their gradual brightening, the peaceful day begins again with such tenderness that this sleep story feels almost circular. A bedtime story moving in a calm orbit of rest and waking, and rest again, because on a future Mars mission, the most comforting hours are often the ordinary ones, the ones in which no great event interrupts the flow of care. No alarm breaks the silence. No harshness enters the room, and instead the habitat simply stirs from sleep in the same gentle rhythm that carried it safely through the night. At first, there is only the faintest shift in the corridor glow, a low amber giving way to a delicate morning brightness. And then the life support hum seems a little clearer, not louder, only easier to notice now that the night has thinned, and one by one, the small signs of waking begin. A soft movement from a sleeping berth, the whisper of fabric, the careful placing of feet on the floor, the unhurried breath of someone stretching into the day, while still held inside the dreamy softness of sleep. And all of it feels so measured, so kind, that the listener can remain perfectly at rest, almost imagining that the habitat itself is rising very slowly from a long and peaceful dream. Beyond the observation port, the Martian plain is visible once more, its ancient surface no longer hidden in darkness, but resting beneath a light so delicate that every rock seems wrapped in calm, every low ridge touched by a patient hand, every drift of dust made velvety and still. And though the land remains vast and dry and older than any human memory, it does not appear empty at all, only spacious, only quiet, only willing to be seen without hurry. And this may be one of the most relaxing facts of all about a calm day on Mars, that the world does not compete for attention, but simply waits, allowing the eye to move slowly over it, allowing the mind to loosen and soften as it takes in the broad horizon and the mild awakening of color in the sleeping quarters. The crew rises in stages, because no one here needs to leap into the day, and that too is part of the comfort. The understanding that good routines are built not from urgency, but from sequence, from a warm drink before a checklist, from quiet washing before spoken conversation, from the familiar kindness of seeing the same corridor, the same neatly stored equipment, the same steady green glow from the garden module down the hall. And each of these ordinary details reassures the body in ways too subtle to measure, telling it once again that warmth remains, air remains, companionship remains, and the day ahead is held within a structure of calm. Soon someone warms water for the first drink of morning, and the gesture feels almost ceremonial in its simplicity. Steam rising faintly, hands pausing around the cup, the little comfort of heat returning to the palms, while outside the plane holds the last coolness of night, and perhaps another crew member stops by the observation port for a moment before any work begins, gazing quietly outward at the widening light, watching as the red dust catches the day in soft tones rather than sharp ones. And if there is a thought of Earth at all, it arrives not with homesickness, but with tenderness, as a distant blue memory held carefully in the mind, present yet not painful, because this habitat, for now, is home enough. Down in the garden module, the leaves have their own morning, lamps already guiding them into their patient work, moisture balanced, trays neat, roots hidden and still. And there is such deep peace in the idea that while the crew slept, the plants continued their quiet exchange, holding part of the little world together without sound. And now, in the first calm hour of the new soul, they stand ready again in soft rows of green, offering not only nourishment, but a kind of visual mercy, a reminder that life, even far from Earth, can remain lush in miniature, calm in miniature, hopeful in miniature. The first light tasks of the day begin without strain. A glance at overnight readings, a note confirming stable systems, a brief check on the power reserves, another on the moisture levels in the garden, and every step in this sequence feels less like work than like a morning ritual practiced, until it has become graceful, a choreography of steadiness in which nothing is wasted and nothing is rushed, because on Mars, where each comfort has been carefully engineered, routine itself becomes one of the greatest luxuries. Through all of this, the landscape outside remains visible, a silent companion to the waking habitat, and the sunrise continues to spread in those muted Martian shades that seem designed for a relaxing story, a palette of rust and honey and pale pink, with long light settling over the plain as if it intends to soothe rather than dazzle. And maybe this is why the morning feels so easy to trust, because the world beyond the windows wakes in the same spirit as the world within, slowly, quietly, without demanding that anyone become more alert than they wish to be, so that even a listener drifting toward deep sleep can rest inside the image without resistance, carried by the thought of a warm shelter on a cold red world, of soft footsteps in a narrow corridor, of plants glowing under careful lamps, of dust lying still beneath a broad and patient sky. And as this gentle bedtime story continues its calm unfolding, the new Martian day does not truly begin with action, but with atmosphere, with light returning to old stone, with human beings waking softly inside a little pocket of engineered kindness, with the sense that the universe, far from being harsh, can at times be exquisitely quiet. And so you remain here for a little longer, listening to the warm hush of the habitat and watching the slow dawn settle fully over Mars, until thought itself becomes light and spacious, until every unfinished concern grows small and distant, and until the calm beginning of another red morning carries you, almost invisibly, deeper and deeper into rest. Soon, as the new soul settles more fully into being, the habitat drifts into the gentle and familiar hour of breakfast. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story, this relaxing story for the softest edge of the morning, nothing is hurried and nothing is sharp, because the crew has learned that the first hour of the day on Mars is best entered the way one steps into warm water, gradually, quietly, with patience for every small sensation, and so the corridor lights brighten by slow degrees. The sleeping berths are left neat and calm behind half-drawn panels, and the common module begins to glow with a low, honey-colored warmth that makes the whole outpost feel less like a machine and more like a little lantern set gently on the red planet. One crew member pauses by the observation port before joining the others, and outside, the pale Martian sun has climbed just enough to lay a thin gold wash over the dust, touching the plain with such restraint that the rocks appear almost powdered with light, while the long horizon keeps its broad and peaceful silence. And there is comfort in that steady view, because Mars never seems to crowd the eyes, only to open them, only to offer space, distance, and a kind of ancient quiet that asks the mind to loosen its grip on ordinary concerns. Inside, warm water is prepared, containers are opened carefully, and breakfast unfolds not as a busy meal, but as a continuation of the night's calm, a gentle bedtime mood lingering into morning, as though the habitat itself wishes to protect every last strand of drowsiness, while also easing the body kindly into wakefulness. And perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about a calm day on a future Mars mission, that even nourishment becomes part of the rhythm of emotional steadiness. Because far from Earth, each ritual matters. Each ordinary act helps shape the day into something safe and familiar. And so a spoon lifted slowly, steam rising faintly, or the sight of a few fresh greens added from the habitat garden can feel almost impossibly comforting. The crew sits together without speaking much at first, and their silence is not empty but companionable, the kind of silence that forms when people trust one another enough not to fill every space with words. And around them, the filtered air moves softly through vents. The life support systems continue their patient work, and the low displays along the walls shine with the steady confidence of instruments that have passed through another night without trouble, all of which gives the room the feel of a sheltered tide pool of human warmth, held inside a vast and cold landscape. In the garden module nearby, leaves continue to gather light under their lamps, and though breakfast is the focus now, the crew carries the garden with them in little ways, in the crispness of a leaf, in the note of freshness added to an otherwise carefully stored meal, in the quiet reassurance that living things are growing only a short corridor away. And this soft relationship between plants and people, between green life and red world, makes the whole habitat feel balanced, as though Earth and Mars have agreed for a little while to share a single breath. Through the window, dust rests still across the plain, but a faint lifting shimmer at the far edge of the view hints that the day is beginning to move in its own quiet planetary way. And even the weather here feels muted and thoughtful, a conversation of thin air, light, and powder-fine soil too delicate to break the peace from indoors. And because the listener is invited only to observe, not to do, the mind can settle more deeply into the story, following the slow movements of cups, hands, and sunlight the way one might follow clouds while lying in bed half awake, half dreaming. Soon, a few simple morning tasks are spoken aloud in low voices, not as burdens, but as soft landmarks in the day ahead. A systems review, a short equipment check, another visit to the garden, perhaps an easy round of observations from inside before anyone even considers stepping outside again. And hearing those plans does not disturb the calm, because they are framed by repetition and care, the same dependable practices returning like verses in a lullaby. And in that repetition, there is something profoundly soothing, the reminder that peace is not made from doing nothing at all, but from doing necessary things without fear, without haste, and with enough gentleness that the heart never needs to race. One person wipes a tabletop in slow circles after the meal. Another seals a container and stores it with neat precision. Another lingers over the final warm sip of morning drink. And all of these gestures seem to carry a kind of quiet devotion, as though the habitat is tended less by procedure alone than by affection, by the simple human desire to make a small place welcoming, orderly, and kind. Outside, the color of the land continues to shift as the sun rises, rust turning briefly to rose, rose to muted amber, amber to a pale copper that seems to hover at the edge of brightness without ever becoming harsh. And if the listener imagines that light falling across their own room, across blankets, pillows, and closed eyelids, then the story becomes softer still, no longer only a tale of Mars, but a bridge between worlds, between the calm habitat and the quiet bed on Earth, where someone listens and begins, little by little, to fall asleep. And so the breakfast hour drifts onward with its warm dishes, green leaves, low voices, and wide Martian view. And the whole morning gathers itself with exquisite patience, wrapping science and shelter and routine into one seamless feeling of safety, until even the thought of another planet no longer feels distant or strange, only peaceful, only spacious, only like a place where a human day can unfold with such tenderness that the body hearing about it cannot help but soften too, breathing more slowly, thinking more faintly, and descending by easy degrees toward deep sleep. After breakfast, the new Martian morning continues in the gentlest possible way, and the habitat seems to settle into that lovely hour when the day is fully awake, but still quiet enough to feel wrapped in sleep. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story, this relaxing story meant to help you fall asleep by drifting through a calm day on a future Mars mission, the work ahead is so light and so orderly that it hardly feels like work at all, only a soft continuation of care. A few peaceful rituals performed in warm, filtered air, while outside the pale sun rests over the red plain without glare or haste. And so the crew begins its morning checks with the same calm rhythm that has guided every hour so far, moving from module to module with unhurried steps, glancing at softly lit panels, confirming that temperatures are steady, moisture levels are balanced, power reserves are healthy, and the little enclosed world inside the habitat remains exactly as it should be, stable and kind, and quietly sustaining. One person pauses beside the life support display, not because there is any concern, but because looking at a system running smoothly can itself be reassuring. and the indicators glow in a mild and restful sequence, each one part of a hidden symphony of air circulation, water recycling, pressure balance, and warmth, all the invisible comforts that make human life on Mars feel less like surviving and more like resting inside a thoughtfully arranged home. And there is something deeply soothing in imagining that on another planet, where the outside air is thin and cold and cannot be breathed, the inside air could still feel so soft, so ordinary, so completely untroubled that the mind no longer notices it, except as a form of peace. Nearby, another crew member checks a storage compartment where folded suits, neatly secured tools, and carefully labeled containers wait in stillness. And even these practical things seem gentle in this hour, because everything in the habitat has its place. And every place has been designed to reduce effort, reduce uncertainty, reduce strain, and perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about a calm future Mars mission, that true comfort would come not from luxury, but from thoughtful order, from the quiet knowledge that each object is where it belongs, each system is doing what it should, and each person can trust the shape of the day. The observation port gathers a pale wash of sunlight now, and beyond it, the broad plain lies in soft layers of rust, rose, and muted amber, the color of ancient dust resting under a sky that still seems more delicate than Earth's. And from this angle, the landscape looks almost painted, smooth in some places, gently textured in others, its low ridges and scattered stones softened by distance, until the whole outside world appears less like a frontier and more like a resting place, an immense still canvas holding the habitat in silence, while the crew moves quietly within. Down the corridor, the garden module continues its patient work. And this morning, someone steps inside to inspect the leaves more closely, brushing a fingertip along the edge of a broad green surface, turning a tray a few degrees toward balanced light, checking the moisture with a practiced eye. And the garden answers with the same wordless calm it always offers, stems upright, leaves cool and luminous, tiny droplets held in careful measure, and the listener can almost feel how much emotional comfort lives in this small room of green. Because in a world of dust and mineral red, even one soft leaf becomes a promise that life can remain tender anywhere. As the checks continue, nothing surprising happens, and the absence of surprise is itself a blessing. The sort of blessing that can only be appreciated in a story built for deep sleep, where uneventful peace becomes the most beautiful outcome of all. And so notes are entered in a log with quiet hands. A filter is inspected and found clean. A panel is adjusted by the smallest amount. A line of data is reviewed and confirmed. And each act settles into the next with such ease that the whole sequence feels like breathing in and out. Look and confirm. Move and pause. Listen and rest. Perhaps in another corner of the common module, a warm drink is prepared again, less from necessity than from habit, because warmth has become one of the habitat's most comforting languages, and the soft rise of heat from a cup seems to join the filtered air, the garden lamps, and the low hum of the systems in saying the same thing over and over. You are safe. You are sheltered. The day is calm. There is no need to hurry if a message from Earth has arrived. It waits quietly in the communications queue, never intruding, never demanding immediate response. And this too adds to the slow and dreamy quality of life so far from home, because even conversation must cross great distances with patience. And patience has shaped everything here. The architecture, the routines, the meals, the sleep, the plants, the gentle morning checks, all of it arranged around the understanding that steadiness is more valuable than speed. By now, the habitat feels fully awake, yet still wrapped in softness, as if the memory of night lingers in the corners and blends with the brightness of morning to create a perfect in-between hour, a suspended hour, a floating hour where the listener does not need to rise into activity, but can instead remain half dreaming inside the story, watching through closed eyes as the crew completes its calm round of duties, and the red world beyond the windows remains broad and silent and endlessly patient. And in that patience, the whole scene becomes more and more soothing until the quiet checks, the green garden, the pale sunlight, and the warm air moving through the habitat merge into one continuous sensation of order and rest. And the mind, hearing all of this, begins to relax its last small tensions, letting thoughts grow slower and lighter, letting the morning on Mars drift on without effort, and letting itself sink gently and almost invisibly toward deeper sleep as the morning ripens into one of those beautifully uneventful hours that seem made especially for a sleep story. The crew turns its attention to a small tray of Martian stones gathered on earlier walks. And in this bedtime story, this relaxing story shaped for quiet listening and deep sleep, even a scientific observation can feel as soft and soothing as watching light move across a bedroom wall, because nothing here is rushed, nothing dramatic is expected, and the purpose is not to conquer or solve the planet all at once, but simply to notice it, to sit with it, to let its details unfold with patient interest beneath the warm and filtered air of the habitat. The tray rests on a clean work surface near the observation port, where the pale sunlight of Mars drifts inward in muted tones, and each stone upon the tray carries a slightly different shade of rust, umber, rose brown, or dusty gold, their colors shaped by iron minerals, their surfaces smoothed or pitted by ages of wind, cold, and time. And the crew studies them with calm delight, turning one gently beneath a lamp, tracing another with a gloved fingertip, weighing a third in the palm, as if it were not merely a sample, but a small and ancient message from the planet itself. Perhaps this is one of the most relaxing facts about a calm day on a future Mars mission, that science does not always look like urgency or noise, but can instead look like stillness, like a few people gathered around a table in low voices, examining the texture of a rock, while the whole wide world outside remains silent and red and untroubled. And there is something deeply comforting in that image, because it reminds the mind that wonder does not have to be loud to be real. One stone shows fine layered lines, delicate as brushstrokes, hinting at the slow settling of material long ago. while another is rounded in a way that suggests endless abrasion, and another still glimmers faintly under direct light, revealing tiny mineral faces that catch brightness and then let it go. And the crew records these features in a measured and sleepy rhythm, noting shape, grain, color, and likely origin, not with excitement that would disturb the peace of this nighttime story, but with the steady pleasure of careful attention, the kind that calms the breathing and quiets the thoughts simply by narrowing the world to one manageable, beautiful thing at a time. Around them, the habitat keeps its dependable hum, a low mechanical lullaby of circulating air, stable warmth, and unseen water cycling through lines and filters. And because all the essential systems are contentedly doing their work, the crew is free to let this hour remain gentle, free to sit in the bright softness of morning and learn from stones that have rested under the Martian sky for ages beyond counting. Outside the window, the landscape appears almost dreamlike in the rising light, broad and open and spare, with low ridges fading into distance and dust lying in soft bands across the plain. And the contrast between that immense, quiet exterior and the small, warm interior space makes the act of observation feel even more intimate, as though the habitat were a lantern of thought placed very tenderly in the middle of a sleeping world. Someone places one of the stones beneath a simple magnifier, and suddenly its surface becomes a tiny landscape of its own, full of fine grains, minute shadows, and subtle textures that would be easy to miss in a hurried life. And here, in a calming narration meant to help the listener fall asleep, that hidden detail becomes a gift, because the more closely the stone is seen, the less there is to worry about elsewhere, the less the mind needs to race ahead toward unfinished tasks or lingering concerns, and the more it can rest inside a single quiet fact that even a small rock on Mars contains a history written slowly, patiently, and without any need for human haste. From time to time, a crew member lifts their eyes from the tray and looks toward the garden module down the corridor, where the green leaves continue their own serene labor under carefully tuned lamps. And this small glance toward living things seems to balance the study of ancient things, plants and stones, breath and mineral, present care and deep planetary time, all of it held together within the habitat in such a peaceful arrangement that the whole mission feels less like an outpost and more like a cocoon of thoughtful companionship between humans and another world. A few notes are entered into the log. A sample is set aside for later analysis. Another is returned to the tray with soft precision, and still the hour remains unbroken, as if Mars itself approves of this quiet pace, this refusal to hurry the morning along, this willingness to let knowledge arrive like drifting dust or warming light rather than like a burst of sound. And while the crew continues its gentle study, the listener may begin to feel the soothing power of repetition in the scene, the turning of a stone, the writing of a note, the faint gleam of a mineral edge, the warm hum in the walls, the steady brightness through the port, the soft green glow beyond the corridor, all of it repeating and blending until the whole chapter becomes a kind of lullaby made of science and silence, a gentle bedtime current carrying you farther from the busy edges of the day and deeper into stillness. In this way, the ordinary work of understanding Mars becomes part of the relaxing story itself, not a lesson to strain after, but a series of calm impressions laid one after another, like smooth pebbles in a quiet stream. And by the time the crew finishes this slow, bright hour, with the tray of stones resting neatly once more on the table, the habitat feels even more peaceful than before, as though the simple act of paying close, kind attention to the planet has made everyone inside a little softer, a little slower, a little more ready for rest. And so, the morning continues in its untroubled way, with the red plain outside, the warm shelter inside, and the ancient language of Martian stone fading gently into the background of your thoughts, until they too become still, light, and ready for sleep. By the time the Martian morning begins to lean toward noon, the habitat has become so settled in its calm that even the next task of the day feels less like work and more like a gentle continuation of thought. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story, this relaxing story designed to help you fall asleep, the crew now gathers around a softly glowing map display where the nearby landscape has been arranged into pale lines, muted elevations, and delicate color shifts that show the shape of the land beyond the walls. And there is something almost impossibly soothing in watching a whole world reduced to such quiet forms. Ridges like sleeping waves, shallow basins like cupped hands, and long, easy slopes fading outward into distances that no one needs to cross today. Because today is calm, and today belongs not to urgency, but to understanding. One crew member rests a hand lightly on the edge of the console, while another slowly traces a route that was walked several sols ago. A short path from the habitat to the weather station and back again, and the line looks so small against the open terrain that it brings not insignificance, but comfort. The sense that human presence on Mars can be gentle, careful, and modest, leaving only a few footprints and a little knowledge behind. And perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about a future Mars mission. That exploration at its best is not loud at all, but patient, almost whispering, content to learn a little at a time from a planet that has waited billions of years and does not need to be rushed now. Outside the observation port, the real landscape rests under a whitening noon light, while on the map, the same terrain appears in softened layers, and the contrast between the wide view and the quiet display makes the moment feel beautifully balanced. Because the eye can wander over the actual plain with its rust-red dust and low, ancient ridges, then return to the screen where that same plain has been translated into calm symbols. And somehow the mind relaxes in the movement between the two, as if the planet itself is offering both a dream and its outline at once. No one speaks very much, because too many words would only disturb the peace of the room. And instead, there are low murmurs about elevation, shading, and sunlight angles, about how the thin atmosphere lets the horizon appear clear in one direction and softened in another, about how the lower gravity changes the feeling of each step beyond the habitat, and about how even short walks must be planned with care, not because the day is dangerous, but because thoughtful preparation is one of the gentlest forms of respect a human being can offer another world. Nearby, the filtered air continues its soft and trustworthy circulation. And from farther down the corridor comes the faint green glow of the garden module, a quiet reminder that while the crew studies maps and landforms, the leaves continue their own serene work, lifting water, gathering light, and keeping a little piece of Earth alive inside the red silence of Mars. And that contrast, green life within and mineral stillness beyond, makes the whole habitat feel like a lullaby written in two colors: soft green and warm rust, breath and stone, shelter and horizon. On the display, an old dry channel appears as a barely visible curve etched into the terrain. And no one treats it with fanfare, only with patient wonder, because Mars keeps many of its stories in subtle places, in the way sediment settles, in the way a slope is worn, in the way dust gathers differently across the ground. And this quiet style of evidence feels perfectly suited to a nighttime story like this one, where facts do not arrive to excite the mind into wakefulness, but to lull it into a slower and more spacious kind of awe. One person gently adjusts the brightness of the screen so it better matches the noon light entering from the port. And instantly, the whole room grows even softer, the map no longer glowing sharply, but resting in the same mellow tone as the rest of the habitat. And then there is only the peaceful act of looking at the nearby ridgeline that might be visited on another calm day, looking at the basin where dust sometimes settles in fine smooth bands, looking at the route markers that show how close the crew remains to home. And every glance seems to say the same thing, that this mission is built around return, around staying within the reach of warmth and air and familiar walls, around carrying curiosity outward only as far as comfort allows. Perhaps an orbiter passes far above, invisible to the eye, helping to knit the surface habitat into a larger quiet web of observation and memory. But even that thought drifts through the room without strain, because everything here is being held by systems, by routines, by distances understood and respected. And for the listener, that is deeply calming. The idea that even on another planet there are maps, patterns, cycles, and dependable paths, that nothing in this moment is lost or chaotic, only broad and old and very patiently known. Soon, the crew begins to mark a simple plan for later, not an ambitious excursion, only an indoor review of rock samples against the terrain map, perhaps a brief look at how certain colors in the dust might correspond to different minerals in the nearby ground. And even this small intention feels soothing, because it belongs to continuity, to the gentle order of one task flowing into the next without interruption, without haste, without anything that would lift the heartbeat. Outside, the noon light now rests almost evenly across the plain, taking away some of the early shadow and leaving the land flatter, quieter, dreamier still, as if the red world itself has entered a restful pause. And inside the habitat, that same pause gathers around the crew, around the low console light, around the still cups and neatly stacked notes, and softly breathing air. until the act of reading a map becomes part of the calming narration itself, part of the gentle bedtime drift, part of the soft science that carries you farther and farther from the busy edges of thought and toward deep sleep, where distance is no longer something to cross, but something to rest inside, where the horizon is broad and kind, and where a peaceful noon on Mars can hold you in such patient stillness that even your thoughts begin to lie down. By the time noon arrives fully on Mars, the habitat has settled into such a soft and balanced stillness that even the simple act of preparing a meal feels like part of a lullaby. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story, this relaxing story designed to help you fall asleep, the crew moves away from the softly glowing map console and into the common room with the same unhurried grace that has shaped the whole day, as though each step has been measured not by urgency, but by comfort, by the quiet understanding that on a calm future Mars mission, the best routines are the ones that protect peace as carefully as they protect air and warmth. The common module receives them in pale honey-colored light, gentle on the walls and kinder still on tired eyes. And the table at the center of the room has already become one of the most soothing places in the habitat, not because it is grand, but because it is familiar, because it gathers people together without demanding anything of them, and because so many small rituals of safety happen there. Warm cups set down carefully, utensils arranged without noise, simple meals portioned with care, and soft voices drifting through the filtered air like threads of calm, woven through the middle of the soul. Outside, beyond the observation port, the red plain lies beneath a pale noon brightness that flattens the shadows and makes the land seem broader and quieter still, as if the whole Martian landscape has entered its own resting hour. And there is something deeply comforting in that sight, the way the rust-colored dust seems to sleep beneath the thin daylight, the way low ridges soften in the distance, the way the horizon stretches outward without interruption, leaving the mind nothing sharp to cling to and nowhere it urgently needs to go. Inside, a warm meal is prepared slowly, each movement deliberate and gentle. One crew member heating water, another arranging containers, another adding a few fresh leaves from the garden module, and the green against the pale dishes looks almost tender enough to quiet the heart on its own. A small reminder that even here, millions of kilometers from Earth, life has found a way to remain soft, fresh, and quietly beautiful. Perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about this calm day on Mars, that human comfort so far from home would be built from such modest things: warmth in a cup, light on a wall, the sight of green leaves, the hum of dependable systems, the knowledge that everyone around you is moving in the same slow and thoughtful rhythm. And because this nighttime story is meant to carry the listener toward deep sleep rather than wakefulness, every detail stays gentle, every image rounded at the edges, every sound reduced to a murmur that seems content to fade into the background of the habitat's steady breath. The crew sits and begins to eat, and for a little while no one says very much, because silence at a shared table can be one of the greatest luxuries of all. A peaceful silence held not by awkwardness, but by trust, by the kind of ease that grows when a small group has spent enough time together to know that quiet companionship is its own nourishment. And while they eat, the life support system continues its unseen work. Air circulating, moisture balanced, water cycling patiently through the hidden pathways of the base. All of it forming the invisible cradle in which this little noon hour can rest. From down the corridor comes the faint green glow of the garden lamps. And though no one is there just now, the plants continue their own silent labor, leaves gathering light, stems holding moisture, roots resting in their trays with patient certainty. And the thought of that calm hidden work seems to blend naturally with the meal, as if the habitat itself is one complete and breathing organism, every room quietly supporting every other, the garden feeding the crew tending the systems warming the rooms sheltering the crew again. One person lifts a cup and pauses to enjoy the warmth before taking a sip. And that tiny pause, that single unhurried moment, becomes part of the calming narration of the chapter. Because on Mars, there is no value in rushing through comfort, no reason to hurry past the very things that make the mind steadier. And so, the whole meal unfolds with the dreamy softness of a slow current, carrying conversation only when it naturally arrives. Perhaps a few words about the nearby ridge on the map, perhaps a small observation about the color of the noon light, perhaps only a quiet acknowledgement that the systems are running smoothly and the day is kind. Beyond the walls, the Martian surface remains broad and silent, ancient and untroubled. And inside the habitat, the air stays warm enough that shoulders drop, breathing slows, and the body remembers it is safe. And maybe for the listener, this becomes the most soothing part of all. The image of a little human shelter resting peacefully on a red world, not battling it, not racing across it, only dwelling gently within it for one calm and ordinary day. When the meal nears its end, the table is cleared in the same slow rhythm with which it was prepared. Containers sealed, surfaces wiped, cups set aside, every movement small and exact, and quiet enough to preserve the softness of the hour. And then, for a brief moment, the common room becomes still again. Noon light at the window, faint green down the corridor, warm air all around. And in that stillness, the whole habitat feels like a place made not only for science, but for rest, for steadiness, for the kind of serene repetition that lets a mind unclench at last. And as this gentle bedtime current continues to carry you onward, the midday meal on Mars fades into the same peaceful hush from which it rose, leaving behind only warmth, quiet, and the slow, comforting sense that on this distant planet, even the simplest human hour can unfold like a dream. After the gentle midday meal has been cleared away, and the last warmth has faded softly from the cups, the habitat enters that especially peaceful part of the soul when everything seems to loosen and settle at once. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story, this relaxing story shaped for deep sleep and calm breathing, early afternoon on Mars feels almost suspended, as though the whole little outpost has drifted into a pocket of time, so still and so carefully held that even thought itself begins to move more slowly. and you remain there in the common room for a moment, not because anything more needs to be done right away, but because the light through the observation port has become so pale and so velvety that it seems to lay a blanket over the red plain outside, turning ridges into soft lines, dust into muted silk, and distance into something kind rather than empty. One crew member gathers the last small notes from the table and places them in order. Another moves quietly toward the storage alcove, and another pauses near the corridor, as if simply enjoying the warm, filtered air and the steady breathing hush of the habitat. And nothing in these movements breaks the peace, because each gesture is part of the outpost's slow afternoon rhythm, a rhythm built from routine, trust, and the knowledge that the most important systems are already running with calm dependability. Perhaps that is one of the most relaxing truths about living gently on Mars, that once the necessary work has been done with care, the day can widen into quiet observation, into simple presence, into those small, unremarkable hours that turn out to be the most soothing of all. And so, the crew allows the habitat to rest around them, while beyond the walls, the broad Martian landscape lies under a subdued brightness that never feels harsh, only distant and fine, as if the sunlight has crossed so much space to arrive here that it has learned to speak in a softer voice. Down the corridor, the garden module glows with its own tender steadiness, and someone steps in for a moment to check the trays, though even that check seems more like companionship than labor. A brief look at the leaves, a touch to a stem, a slow glance at moisture and light, and then a quiet stillness while the plants continue their patient work, gathering what they need and asking for very little in return. And it is easy to feel soothed by them, by their calm certainty, by the way they stand in rows of green composure inside a world of red stone and ancient dust, holding a pocket of living softness in the center of the habitat, like a small, peaceful heart. In another section of the outpost, a panel is reviewed with unhurried attention, not because anything is amiss, but because part of the serenity of this future Mars mission comes from the habit of noticing, and the display offers only reassuring things: stable lines, balanced levels, quiet order, all the unseen circulations of air, warmth, and water moving through the structure in loops so dependable that they become almost invisible. And yet that invisibility is part of the comfort, because the finest forms of care are often the ones that work without calling attention to themselves, like blankets already in place before the cold arrives, like a lamp dimmed before tired eyes think to ask for it. From the observation port, the view remains wide and dreamlike. And if you let your mind rest there long enough, the Martian plain begins to resemble a sleeping ocean stilled into stone, its dust lying in drifts and bands, its low rises folding one after another toward the horizon. And although there is no sound outside, no surf, no trees, no birds, the silence does not feel vacant, only complete, a silence so old and spacious that it seems able to hold every stray thought, until that thought grows quiet too. The crew, understanding this in the easy bodily way that comes from living here long enough, speaks very little now, because the afternoon itself asks for fewer words. And instead, there are only soft domestic sounds within the habitat, the faint placement of a cup into its holder, the whisper of fabric as someone settles into a seat, the muted touch of fingers across a console, the low, continuous hum of systems that never seem to tire, and all of it blends into a kind of calming narration made not from speech, but from atmosphere, from the sense that everything essential is being tended, and therefore nothing must be forced. One crew member chooses to spend a few quiet minutes looking over earlier observations from the stone tray, and even that feels restful, because the shapes and textures of the samples, their dusty surfaces and subtle mineral gleams, connect the room to the world outside without requiring anyone to leave the comfort of shelter, while another simply sits by the window and lets their gaze soften over the plain, allowing the mind to drift with the light. And perhaps this too is part of the quiet wisdom of life on Mars. That rest can take many forms: a slow task, a still gaze, a warm drink, a visit to the garden, a silent pause in the corridor where the air is warm and the lights are low. As the hour stretches gently onward, the habitat seems less like a structure and more like a shared breath, each room linked to the next by warmth, routine, and care. The sleeping berths waiting peacefully for later, the common room holding the calm after the meal, the garden lifting its green leaves toward patient lamps, the observation port framing the ancient red plain in pale afternoon light, and somewhere deep within all of it, your own thoughts begin to lengthen and thin, losing their sharp edges, surrendering their little urgencies, because this gentle bedtime world has no use for hurry, only for softness, only for steadiness, only for the slow and tender unfolding of a calm day on a future Mars mission. And so the early afternoon drifts on without demand or interruption, carrying you farther into rest, farther into the warm hush of the habitat, farther into that lovely space where waking and dreaming overlap, until the red planet outside and the quiet shelter within become one continuous feeling of peace, and you, listening, can simply let go and follow it as the early afternoon drifts almost imperceptibly toward its later hours. The habitat settles into an even deeper hush, the kind of hush that seems to gather in the corners of rooms and along the edges of softly lit panels. And in this sleep story, this bedtime story, this relaxing story for the quietest part of your evening, the crew turns once more toward a set of listening instruments near the observation port, not because anything urgent has happened, but because one of the gentlest ways to spend time on Mars is simply to notice what the planet is already doing in its own calm and ancient rhythm. And so the afternoon becomes an hour of soft attention, of low displays and pale graphs, and tiny changes so subtle that they feel less like data and more like breathing. Outside, the red plain rests beneath a mellow light that has begun to warm from pale noon into a finer late afternoon gold, and the dust beyond the window looks almost silky, lying in quiet bands across the ground, while distant ridges soften further into the horizon. And because the Martian atmosphere is so thin, the light always seems to arrive with a certain delicacy, filtered through distance, restrained and kind, as though even the sun has agreed to keep its voice low. On this calm day, one crew member sits beside the instrument panel and reviews a stream of weather readings gathered from nearby sensors. And the work itself is so gentle that it hardly disturbs the peaceful atmosphere at all, because on a future Mars mission, understanding the outside world often means watching slow patterns unfold. Air pressure shifting only slightly, temperature easing downward as afternoon matures, dust lifting in faint traces somewhere far beyond the habitat. All of it part of a world that does not rush and does not need to be hurried. And perhaps that is one of the most relaxing facts about Mars, that even its changes can feel spacious enough for the mind to rest inside them. The others move quietly through the common area, one pausing with a warm cup in hand, another checking a note from earlier in the soul, another standing for a moment in the corridor between the garden and the window, as if simply enjoying the balance of the habitat itself. Green light in one direction, red landscape in the other, warm, filtered air all around, and in that stillness, the whole outpost feels less like a station and more like a carefully held pause, a pocket of human tenderness folded into a vast and silent planet. Sometimes the instrument display offers only the smallest movement, a line rising or falling by the gentlest degree. And yet, even that is soothing, because it reminds everyone that Mars is alive, with quiet processes, the land cooling and warming, the air moving invisibly, the dust responding to sunlight and slope and season. And all of these slow exchanges continue without spectacle, like the turning of a sleeping body beneath blankets, like the gradual dimming of a room before evening, like thoughts that once felt sharp and now begin to blur pleasantly at the edges. In the garden module, the leaves remain steady under their lamps, and from where you sit, you can almost imagine that they too are listening, that the whole habitat is listening, not only to the planet, but to itself, to the gentle pulse of recycled water, to the hush of moving air, to the dependable little heartbeats of systems designed to keep warmth, breath, and calm in circulation. And there is such deep comfort in that image, because this nighttime story is not about surviving through fear, but about resting inside care, about the soft competence of a crew that has learned how to make another world feel almost domestic. Now and then, one of them glances through the port instead of at the display, and the eye moves from the measured language of instruments to the real land itself, to the dust-smoothed rocks and low red folds of ground, and the broad, untouched quiet that stretches outward in every direction. And the movement between those two ways of seeing, the scientific and the simply visual, becomes its own soothing rhythm, a gentle back and forth, chart and horizon, number and light, understanding and wonder, until the differences between them no longer matter, and both become part of the same calming narration. Perhaps a delayed message from Earth rests unread for a little while longer, because nothing here needs to break the peace too quickly, and that too feels fitting, since space itself teaches a slower pace, a longer breath, a kinder distance between question and answer. And by now, the listener can feel how this Martian afternoon holds that lesson in every detail, in the long soul that stretches just a little beyond an Earth day, in the careful routines that preserve energy, in the low gravity that makes every remembered step outside seem lighter, and in the way the habitat encourages not haste, but steadiness, not noise, but presence. One small alert tone sounds at last from the panel, but it is only a quiet reminder to archive the latest set of readings. And even that sound is mild, almost musical in the still room. And when the data is stored with a few patient touches, the display returns to its calm glow, as if nothing more need be said. And truly, nothing more does, because the day has become so balanced now that every necessary act seems to complete itself without strain. As the light continues to soften outside, late afternoon begins its gentle slide toward evening, and the red world grows dreamier by degrees, more copper than gold now, more hush than brightness, while within the habitat, the warm air, the green leaves, the listening instruments, and the quiet human presence all settle together into a single serene picture. And if you have followed this gentle bedtime drift from morning until now, then perhaps your own thoughts have begun to quiet in the same way, becoming slower and lighter, no longer trying to solve or plan or remember, but simply resting here beside the softly glowing panel, beside the wide Martian window, beside the warm, sheltered life of the habitat, where a calm day continues to unfold exactly as it should, and where the measured silence of another planet can carry you with exquisite patience toward deep sleep. And now the calm day on Mars draws to its quiet close, not with any sudden ending, not with any sharp farewell, but with the same patient tenderness with which it began, as though the whole red planet has spent these long, peaceful hours teaching you how to loosen, how to soften, how to rest inside the wide and ancient hush of another world. And in this final sleep story, this last gentle stretch of bedtime story and nighttime story, the habitat settles once more into evening as the soft copper light beyond the observation port thins into dusk. The low ridges darken, the rust-colored plain becomes smoother and more velvety with every passing minute, and the warm rooms within the outpost seem to gather themselves close around the crew, like a blanket carefully drawn over sleeping shoulders. No one needs to say very much now, because everything that needed doing has already been done with quiet hands and calm attention. The instruments have listened, the plants have been tended, the water has moved faithfully through its hidden loops, the air has remained kind and breathable, the meals have been warm, the notes have been written, and the day has unfolded exactly as a peaceful day should, with enough structure to feel safe and enough silence to feel spacious. And perhaps that is one of the most relaxing truths of all about this future Mars mission, that a human life so far from Earth can still be made of ordinary comforts, of routine, of warmth, of leaf light and low voices, and slowly dimming corridors, until even the extraordinary setting begins to feel as natural as a quiet room at home. The garden module glows down the corridor with its last tender green of the chapter, and though you do not need to go there now, it remains in the mind like a little heart of life, nestled inside the habitat, breathing softly for everyone, holding the memory of moisture and growth and patient care, while outside the cold settles gently over the planet's broad and silent surface. And the contrast between those two worlds, green and red, warm and cool, sheltered and vast, no longer feels stark at all. Only balanced, only beautiful, only part of the calming narration that has carried you from dawn to dusk without ever asking you to hurry. The crew moves through its final evening rituals with the softness of long practice. A cup put away, a panel dimmed, a blanket straightened, a quiet glance through the window where the last thin light fades from the horizon and leaves behind a sky of deepening stillness. And if one of Mars's small moons happens to rise above the dark plain, it does so without announcement, gliding like a thought too gentle to hold for long, while the habitat remains steady beneath it. A lantern of human calm set down with care on the sleeping world. Now the corridor lights lower a little more, and the common room that held the midday meal and the afternoon hush becomes once again a place of near-whispered peace. The tables clear, the surfaces warm-toned and still, the filtered air moving in its endlessly patient rhythm. And the mind, listening to this relaxing story, may already be beginning to mirror that rhythm, breathing more slowly, drifting farther from the edges of the day, forgetting the need to plan, to answer, to remember, because none of those things belong to this hour, and none of them need follow you any farther into the soft dark. This gentle bedtime is asking less and less of you now, only that you remain here for a little longer in imagination, inside the Mars habitat where the walls are warm, the systems are quiet, the leaves are safe under their lamps, and the red world beyond, the glass has become a dark and peaceful sea of stone, all roughness erased by distance and shadow, all old stories folded into silence, until they are no longer facts to be learned, but textures to rest against. Perhaps you can feel yourself lying down now in one of the sleeping berths, or perhaps simply in your own bed, while this bedtime story fades around you. And the sensation is almost the same, a sense of being gently held, of being lighter than before, as if even your thoughts have entered that lower Martian gravity and no longer press so heavily on the mind. And one by one, they begin to drift free, the unfinished thoughts, the small worries, the bright pieces of the day, all floating upward and away like fine red dust, lifting briefly in a distant light breeze before settling somewhere too far away to matter. The habitat hum continues, not loudly, only faithfully, the kind of sound that asks for trust and receives it. And beyond it, there is the deeper silence of Mars itself, ancient, cold, immense, but never cruel in this story, only vast in a way that makes your own burdens feel smaller, softer, easier to set down. And so, the whole world of the story begins to dim at the edges, the observation port darkening, the corridors quieting, the green leaves becoming only a memory of softness, the crew already sleeping, the instruments resting in their calm glow, and you too allowed now to rest, allowed to stop following every sentence, allowed to let the words become slower and farther apart in your mind, as though they are traveling across space before reaching you. This is the final hush of the calm day on Mars, the last warm breath of the habitat at the edge of night, the moment when the red planet and your own inner quiet become one unbroken field of stillness. And there is nothing left to do here, nowhere left to go, no final effort to make, only the gentle permission to fall asleep, to sink into deep sleep, to let this nighttime story dissolve into softness around you until the copper sky, the warm room, the green leaves, the silent plain, and the low steady hum all fade together into one peaceful darkness. And then even that darkness grows lighter somehow, softer somehow, quieter somehow, until you are no longer listening so much as floating, no longer thinking so much as resting, no longer holding the day at all, only drifting, gently drifting into sleep.